The mind controls the body but the breath controls the mind. One short sentence, but it contains the great paradox that this book continually depicts. For years we are taught how to memorize formulas, how to solve problems, how to pursue goals. But no one in class tells us that if we want to study well, work effectively, and live consciously, we must first learn how to breathe through our childhood. Youth and adulthood are like people running on a noisy highway, forgetting that every step is connected to a breath. I remember the first time I read a line in the original document. You can't concentrate if your brain is deprived of oxygen, and your brain never gets enough oxygen if your breathing is disturbed. That statement made me dizzy. Because it turns out that all those years I thought my lack of concentration wasn't because of a lack of willpower, but simply because I was breathing wrong. And if I'm wrong, millions of others are wrong too. The book you are about to hear me narrate is not a cliched guide. Try to work hard. It is a biological and mental map that shows us that focus is not an inborn asset but a skill that can be trained. And that path of training begins not with complicated methods but with the simplest things. Breath. I have met too many people who live in a state of constant distraction. They sit at their desks but their minds are broken. They try to get 8 hours of sleep but still feel groggy in the morning. They drink coffee, use time management apps, write down goals, but still fail to meet a silent enemy. Disorder of breathing. This book peels back layers to show us the tight connection between breathing and focused sleep. It turns out that deep sleep is impossible while we are still breathing rapidly. It demonstrates that a clear mind only comes when the body learns to befriend the mind, and it provides specific exercises from simple to advanced to turn theory into everyday experience. But I don't want you to approach this book as a collection of math tips. I want you to read it as a mirror into yourself. Because the most important question is not what the author says, but how are you breathing? Have you ever woken up with a dry throat and thought it was normal? Have you ever walked into a meeting with your heart pounding and blamed yourself for being mentally weak? Have you ever sat down to study or work but your mind kept wandering somewhere else? If so, try stopping for a minute and realizing that the root may lie in something you never thought of, the way you inhale and exhale. This book does not promise to turn you into a genius overnight. It doesn't sugarcoat old recipes. It does something more uncomfortable, forcing you to face the fact that you have never had control over your breathing and therefore never had control over your concentration. But in that confrontation, a door opens. The gateway to mastering the state from sleep to daytime alertness. So the question I want to ask you as we begin this journey is, do you dare to believe that to transform your entire spiritual life, all you need is to relearn how to breathe? Before going into the book review, we encourage listeners to buy and read it to fully experience the book's content. Because only when you read this book will you understand the issues I am talking about. Please buy the book and support the author. Now let's start reviewing this book with me. I used to sit in class. Eyes on the board but mind running wild like an untamed horse. Fake teacher friends take notes. And I was drifting in some kind of obscurity. I wasn't unintelligent, I just couldn't keep my attention still, and as if to assert that weakness, I constantly get judgments. This guy can't practice anything. The paradox is that during all my years of studying, people crammed all kinds of formulas, theorems, and works into my head, but no one taught me how to calm my mind, how to pin my attention to a single point. They taught me to calculate, analyze, and debate, but no one showed me how to stay with an idea long enough for it to come to fruition. The problem is not just mine. The education system builds giant frames that require students to focus but never gives them the keys to do it. The same goes for society in the future. An employee, a doctor, an athlete, a soldier. Everyone is required to concentrate. But that basic skill is considered second nature. Lucky one. Whoever lacks it is on their own. I used to think I was one of the unlucky ones until One day in 1997, an old newspaper tore through that fog. The article is about breathing. It sounds so simple it's almost funny. I lived all these years without realizing that the movement in and out of my chest was the key I was looking for. People often associate breathing with biological survival. Inhale and exhale to sustain life. But the article claims more than that. Breathing can alter brain state, improve sleep, and enhance concentration and intuition. Even the proper breathing techniques were completely opposite to what I was taught in gym classes. I was redundant and I was shocked to find myself different. The chaotic thoughts in my head calmed down like a lake after a wind. Long nights of tossing and turning suddenly turned into deep sleep. I no longer get upset by small pressures, no longer get pushed into a state of extreme anger by trivial annoyances. What changed was not the circumstances but how my body reacted to them. Stress doesn't go away, but the way I handle it is different. I began to see a crack in the chaos to step into. Stop and take a slow, deep breath. And then the storm was just a howl outside the window. It was the beginning of a path I never thought I would take, turning my breath into a career, into a mission. From being a hopeless student, I have been able to train thousands of people around the world, business people, athletes, special forces soldiers. All share a common desire to master focus. I tell this not to flatter myself but to prove that if I, a person who was lost in my own head, can change, then anyone can. But the lingering question remains. If focus is the key that opens almost every door to success, why isn't it taught from the beginning? We get caught up in years of hard study without anyone ever mentioning that we want to study effectively. Must learn to stop the noise in head. As a result, millions of adults enter life with noisy, distractible brains. Can't sit still for more than a few minutes without being pulled away by a phone, email, or a random thought. I realize that distraction not only kills productivity, it also eats away at more personal things. Relationships, confidence, joy of life. A person who is always absent-minded will never really listen to the person opposite. And so the conversations became awkward. A person who cannot sit still with himself will find it difficult to develop his self-study ability, and losing concentration will also give rise to a feeling of uselessness. As if I were an imperfect person. So are we forever helpless before our own distracted brains? Or can it be changed from within? I found the answer and I know it's not out there. It lies in every breath, in every silence that we often overlook. I used to think success was a complicated thing. You had to be smart enough, lucky enough, connected enough, patient enough, but the deeper you dig. The more I observe the people who are considered the top of the world, the more I realize a paradox. They don't talk much about those factors. When asked what the deciding factor was, their answers were shockingly concise. There was a dinner party one year where Bill Gates first met Warren Buffett, and Jest's mother asked what was the most important thing to lead to success. The table fell silent. Buffett answered first. Short, focus. Guest nodded. Same word, focus. Two people with hundreds of billions of dollars in assets. Two minds considered to be geniuses, coincidentally met, chose the same seemingly simple concept, not opportunity, not timely investment, not foresight but focus. It sounds simple but focus actually contains a whole world. It is not synonymous with concentration. Attention is focused for a few minutes. It is also not the same as arch span. The amount of time you can sustain attention before getting bored. Concentration is choosing a point and locking the light of the mind on it. Like a laser beam scanning the darkness. It may be just a small spark at first but it lasts. That fire is enough to melt iron and steel. Science says that attention span is unstable. It fluctuates like a light bulb that flickers on and off. Our brains are wired to run after distraction. But it's not a life sentence, it's a mental muscle, and muscles can be trained. You can't expect to get stronger muscles without lifting weights. Likewise, you cannot expect lasting focus without going through the knocks, training and pressure. The difficulty lies in the fact that the present world is designed to eliminate that possibility. Phone vibrates, email jumps. Social networks scream. Our mind is like a sugar addict who always rushes for instant sweetness instead of sitting down to enjoy a long meal. So how do you take back the reins? Some people say, just eliminate distractions, clear your desk, turn off your phone notifications. Sounds reasonable. But if it were that easy, we'd all be focused geniuses. The problem isn't just the environment, it's the noisemaker in your head. You can clear the room, but if your brain is still full of automatic chatter, distractions will still take hold. I started experimenting on myself, setting small goals, stopping just when I realized my mind was being pulled away. Each time I successfully retained my attention, I felt like I had just defeated an invisible enemy. And I understood that focus is not an either-or game, but a long-term practice. Billionaires, athletes, and top artists, what makes them different from us? It's not that they were born with different brains, it's that they learned to keep their minds still long enough. And it's that consistency that gives birth to products, ideas, and strategies that make the world bow. The secret I want to share is not an abstract philosophy. It is a skill that can be learned. But to learn it first requires a glaring truth. We live in an age where attention is the scarcest resource. Who has it? Who has the advantage? Who is it to probe? No matter how smart you are, you will only run around in circles in exhaustion. So let's put aside the big question. How to succeed? Instead, try asking yourself, how long can I focus without my attention being shattered? The answer is simple. Having decided most of the path you will take, focus is like a sharp blade. But that knife will become dull very quickly if we use it to cut everything indiscriminately. I have witnessed many people become victims of multitasking. They work endlessly, open dozens of projects, hundreds of ideas, but instead of moving forward, they become exhausted, they are stuck in a self-made network. There is a story that I remember forever related to Warren Buffett and his loyal pilot Mike Flint. Flint once flew ice, a man who excelled in his profession. One day, Buffett looked at him and said, "The fact that you're still my pilot is proof that I've failed. You should go out and pursue your goals." Flint was surprised and Buffett guided him through a simple exercise. Write down the 25 most important things you want to achieve in your life. FN followed suit. Then BF said, "Now circle the 5 most important things." Finn said, "I'll focus on these 5, but I'll also keep an eye on the other 20 when I have time." Buffett shook his head, "Wrong. The other 20 things were on the list that you had to avoid at all costs. They would destroy you because they felt important but prevented you from moving forward." It was a shocking lesson. We often think failure comes from a lack of effort. But sometimes failure comes from trying too hard for the wrong things. It's the near importance that's dangerous. Because it lures us into wasting time without ever making a breakthrough. I began to introspect. How many years had I wasted on my own top 20? The goals sounded good but actually only took me away from the core when I learned to firmly say no. I found that the true power of focus is not in taking on more but in knowing how to let go. This may sound harsh, but if you look at reality, you will see that most of the stagnation comes not from lack of opportunity but from digression. People set out dozens of goals but none of them are pursued to the end. They end up in a state of half-heartedness. Not a complete failure but not a complete success either. Imagine focus as a beam of light. If it is radiated in all 4 directions, it is only a dim light. But if it is condensed into a laser beam, it can cut through steel. Today's world has so many calls that it is easy to think that we need to respond to them all. But sometimes the only answer is silence. I used to think that multitasking was a sign of high ability. But research has proven otherwise. When we try to do more than one thing at a time, our overall performance drops sharply and our ability to focus long-term is also damaged. Hurt. The brain is forced to constantly switch states, like a machine that turns on and off repeatedly until it breaks down. In my journey, there were mornings when I forced myself to sit down with just one task, phone silent. Emails piled up regardless. At first, it was hard, like I was fighting against the world. But once I got past the initial resistance, something strange happened. Time stretched, the mind became clearer, and work seemed to flow by itself. Focus then stopped being an effort and became a natural flow. But to get that, you have to be willing to pay the price of giving up. Giving up goals that sound good. Giving up attractive but not really necessary offers. Giving up ingrained habits that only keep you busy but not productive. Buffet was right if you want to succeed. You can't just choose the important, you also have to have the courage to say no to the less important. Sometimes saying no is harder than accepting. But it is in that refusal that you find the space for your mind's explosive intelligence. And I believe if there is one thing worth practicing every day, it is the art of saying no. Because behind every wise refusal is a door that opens to true concentration. There is a secret that many people do not want to face. Concentration is not just a story of willpower, it is supported by a silent biological foundation, deep sleep. When the brain is not properly rested, every effort to concentrate becomes a hopeless battle. I once worked with a hotel manager. He admitted that half of his staff hardly slept properly. They entered their shifts with dark circles under their eyes, their minds were foggy, and they tried to cope with coffee and fake energy. A survey of thousands of workers showed that nearly 40% in the service industry do not get enough sleep, and the consequences are obvious. They are tired, irritable, productivity is reduced. And most of them are thinking of quitting. The statistics are much colder. Every year, lack of sleep causes companies the U.S. loses more than $400 billion in lost productivity and rising healthcare costs. People often joke about sleeping less to do more. In fact, it's the lack of sleep that's really making things go downhill. One study found that sleep deprivation costs companies an average of nearly $2,000 a year. During the pandemic, with millions working from home, the situation is even worse. 70% admit to having disturbed sleep. Those numbers aren't meant to scare people, they're meant to make a point. If you want to master focus, start with sleep. Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it changes the entire way your brain works. People who sleep less are at higher risk of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and even early death. But the scariest thing for me is how sleep deprivation erodes your clarity when you're sleep deprived. Your brain functions like a computer that never takes out the trash. Old data accumulates, new connections don't form, and processing speed becomes dependent. Sleep. Meanwhile, deep sleep is the process of cleaning up the hard drive. It eliminates weak connections, retains strong connections, creates conditions for strong memory and sharp concentration. I have met many artists, athletes, and businessmen. They all admit a simple truth. Without good sleep, all other skills are meaningless. A musician can hold the guitar for 12 hours, but if he has not slept the night before, the music will sound forced. An athlete can practice for months, but just 1 week of sleep deprivation is enough to destroy his form. I once fell into a state of fake sleep, going to bed early, waking up early. I thought I was living a healthy life, but still woke up feeling like I had never slept. The problem is not the number of hours of sleep, but the quality of sleep. I brought that tired body to class only to hear the teacher's sarcasm. You should go pick potatoes instead of coming here and falling asleep. Those words are imprinted in my memory. I am a proof. It's vivid that society is unforgiving of those who are not alert. We often think we can compensate for lack of sleep by resting on the weekends. But science denies that. You can't replenish what's lost. A body that is chronically sleep-deprived will create hidden cracks in the brain that will eventually collapse. This explains why many people, no matter how hard they try, still cannot concentrate. They start from a rotten foundation. The truth is that sleep deprivation also creates a vicious cycle with breathing. When you breathe quickly and heavily, your brain receives a danger signal. And that is what wakes you up in the middle of the night. A bad breath during the day will follow you into sleep, turning the night into a series of sudden awakenings. And each time, the ability to concentrate is eroded a little more. Concentration cannot be built on rotten soil. It needs a solid foundation, and that foundation starts in the hours you close your eyes. I remember reading an interview with Jeff Bezos. He said bluntly, 8 hours of sleep every night not only to stay healthy but also to protect the interests of Amazon shareholders with him. Sleep is a business tool. Because without it, every strategic decision becomes dull. Another entrepreneur, Tobias L.K., founder of S-Fi, also confessed that he needs enough sleep to work effectively. Even basketball player LeBron James, with his grueling schedule, insists that at least 8 hours a night is what keeps him in top form. People at the top of society all say with one voice, success cannot come without sleep deprivation. So why do most of us take pride in trimming it? Why does society still see staying up all night as a badge of hard work? It is this false belief that has turned millions of people into coffee addicts, drifting through the day, trying to stay awake while their brains are exhausted. I used to force myself into the habit of working more and sleeping less. During the day I drank cup after cup of coffee, trying to stay awake. At night I repeat the vicious cycle again. As a result, the body is tired, the mind is hazy, and work becomes a series of half-hearted efforts. Sleep turns out not to be a negotiable luxury but a mandatory part of the brain's hardware. You ignore it, the whole system crashes. As I began to research further, I realized that the biggest enemy of sleep is breathing. Many people believe that breathing a lot is deep breathing, but in fact it is just panting. Taking air into the upper chest, as a result at night they snore, stop breathing or wake up in the middle of their sleep. The body interprets that rapid breathing as a danger signal. Force the brain to wake up to protect life. A night like that was nothing but slow torture. Remember, quality is more important than quantity. You can lie in bed for 8 hours. But if you breathe incorrectly, the brain never enters the deep recovery phase, whereas if you just adjust your breathing correctly, 4 or 5 sleep cycles are enough to do with the whole system. That is why top athletes and special forces are always trained in breath control skills along with physical training. I have seen people who thought they had chronic insomnia. Turns out it was just mouth breathing. They woke up with dry throats and heavy heads. Then the next day, Lil walked in a mental fog. When I guide them to switch to slow nose breathing, the miracle happened. After just a few weeks, deep sleep returned. The feeling of opening their eyes in the morning with a light body and a clear mind is like a miracle to them. And there a paradox emerges. We are always on the lookout for performance hacks. Brain tonics, time management software, anti-distraction tools, but they miss the most basic element. Sleep is supported by correct breathing. You can use any work management strategy. But if you breathed wrong last night and slept fitfully, today will be just a series of small failures. I often wonder why something as simple as breathing is so taken for granted. Maybe because it's so normal. We do it thousands of times a day without even realizing it. It is this very ordinariness that conceals its power. But once you see it, you can't ignore it. If you want to know where you are on the concentration map, first look into your sleep. It is the most accurate mirror. A deep night will make a clear day. A broken night will ring down a chaotic day. And focus. In the end, one can only grow up in a well-rested land. There is a simple test that can reveal your condition. Bot position level test. It's no joke. It's not even a physical test. It's just a matter of you sitting down, breathing in, breathing out, holding your breath, and timing until you feel the need to breathe again. Sounds easy, right? But the results are not easy to swallow. My first try. I was so frustrated that I wanted to give up. The needle had not yet finished running around when my body was already queasy. My throat tightened and instinct made me gasp for air. I thought I was fine, but the truth was my body was so addicted to the habit of breathing rapidly and shallowly that even a few seconds of silence sent it into a panic. Dad's score says more than you think in under 15 seconds. You are living in a state of constant alert. The body reacts to every small stimulus as if it were an urgent threat. The heart beats faster, the brain is flooded with warning signals, and the ability to concentrate evaporates in 15 to 25 seconds. You start to have some control, but it's still easy to fall into a stress spiral for more than 25 seconds. A different realm opens up, you become calmer, your mind is clearer, your sleep is deeper, and concentration becomes a natural flow. When I explain this to students, many people laugh, wondering how a few seconds of holding their breath can reveal their entire spiritual life, but they only laugh until they try it themselves. Panic set in at the very first moment. And that feeling is the truth. It's not your willpower that's being tested, but the biological stability of your nervous system. A person with a short father is like a machine that is always running on overload. No matter how hard they try, they are easily distracted, irritable, and have trouble sleeping. One manager told me that every time he walked into a meeting, his heart would race and his mind would wander. As a result, he talked a lot but no one remembered what he said. While training to lift bots, he discovered a naked truth. The problem is not communication skills. But it was the breath that made him unable to keep his composure. What interests me most is how accurately it reflects even everyday moments. A person with low boots is often never fully present in the conversation. When you speak, they nod but their eyes wander. While working they open one window and 10 minutes later are lost in another window. They don't mean to be disrespectful, it's just that the body isn't capable of anchoring the focus. On the contrary, a person with high boots has what I call a quiet presence. They don't have to be serious, nor do they have to force themselves. Their concentration radiated an atmosphere that forced others to stop as well. Listening, it's the kind of energy we often mistake for innate confidence. But in fact it is built from regularly practiced breathing. When I first looked at my own results, I understood that to master the mind, one must first master the body. You can't stop your brain from being distracted if your lungs are constantly screaming in panic. Concentration. It turns out that it doesn't start with forcing the will, but with a gentle breath that is enough to calm the entire system. I have met many people who believe that concentration is simply a matter of mental training. They read magic books, try time management apps, even buy noise-canceling headphones in hopes of blocking out the world. But they still reel in fatigue, still wake up in the middle of the night, still feel like someone always running after life itself. They do not understand that distractions come not only from the outside but also from within the body, where breathing controls the entire nervous system. A low potency index is no accident. It shows that your body is used to living in a state of alert. Your brain never believes that things are safe. And when safety doesn't exist, focus is just an illusion. You might hold on for a few minutes, but then the undercurrent of anxiety immediately washes it all away. I have seen people who can be thrown into turmoil by just one unexpected phone call. Their hearts raced, they broke out in sweat, and they lost the ability to think clearly. When I checked, their 4 never exceeded 10 seconds. In contrast, those who achieved over 25 seconds had a completely different appearance. They are not easily caught up in chaos. Bad news comes, they still listen, still process, but inside they still maintain a quiet area. It is that quiet space that is the soil in which concentration takes root.